if you take it, it has the P for the purple, but if you turn it upside down, you get the D for deep purple. So it is kind of neat how they kind of design that so that it does like that.
Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome to the Thursday Collection Connection, where we're playing that game. It's just an excuse to talk about records. I'm going to show a record that is in my music collection that is related to an album shown by my brother, who's the guy I play the game with. And his videos are over on the Plastic Soundwave Cult channel. He's Plastic Eric, my literal brother. And yeah, we play back and forth, finding some connection, be it factual or conceptual, to albums, and we just lob the ball back and forth in a long rally. So you can check out his last video, which was about Deep Purple's Come Taste the Band from 1975, I think. It was, as he described, not what I would think of as Deep Purple, and I'm not necessarily a Deep Purple guy. I will say that Come Taste the Band is a gross album name and a super cheeseball album cover with all their faces in the glass of port or whatever that is. I like some of the songs, including the last song. I'm not going to remember any of the titles off my head now because I've tried to cram other info into my head for the video. They were jammier than I would have expected from Deep Purple, but I guess this was a band, because it's Deep Purple's not a band that I follow, a band that had a lot of evolutions over time, to the point where their Wikipedia page breaks down their career in Mark 4, Mark 5, Mark 6, Mark 7, Mark 8, Mark 9, stages and lineups. Now, I was going to mention in the video last week when I showed Death Cab for Cutie that they were named after a song from the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band back in 1967. Forgot to mention it because, again, I try and put too much information and not all of it makes it back out of my mouth while I'm shooting the video. And I was sort of pleased that Eric caught that anyway and made that his connection. And probably he would have preferred that I hadn't said it, having made that his connection. We keep a little spreadsheet on the albums that we're doing so that we can see if we've done it before. Sometimes it's hard to remember if you've talked about an album or not, if you know you've talked about the band. Was it this album? Etc. In the same way, so I had seen what his pick was going to be about a day before his video posted. And I had already started doing some research, and so it's my turn now to be annoyed with something that I was going to make my connection that he actually ended up mentioning in the video. And that is that after Come Taste the Band, 3 band members, and I'm trying to remember, was it Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale, and of course Tommy Bolin, who passed away. That was their last, and in some cases only, Deep Purple album. Now, in the case of Deep Purple, it's because they kind of put the band on ice for a while after that album, only reforming in the mid-'80s, in part, I guess, due to a response of the original singer kind of touring under the name Deep Purple, and none of the other band members liked that. So they took him to court, made him stop doing it, and they decided to reunite at that point using an earlier lineup. I think it was the Mark II lineup on Wikipedia, if I remember, and kind of went from there. So it was a long hiatus, and they just reformed. Tommy Bolin had passed away, but they decided to reform with an earlier lineup that didn't include Glenn Hughes, I guess, and I'm not sure if David Coverdale was there or not as the singer, but I don't think he was involved then with the reunion. So 3 band members after 1 album leaving the band, and so I glommed onto that and thought, what other band might I have where it's a similar process? Because that's a significant chunk of any band, 3 members. Anyway, rambling story short, the band I figured out lost 3 band members after 1 album is the band who I talked about a little over a year ago. So I have done one of their albums before. Thank you, Spreadsheet. That time I did Mind Bomb, and this time I'm doing the album following that, which is Dusk from 1993. The is an interesting case because the first album, Soul Mining, was just Matt Johnson. He did everything on the album and co-produced it as well. By the second album, he got session musicians, I believe, in to do some of the percussion, but it was still mostly a one-man project. And it wasn't until Mind Bomb that he really put together a band that he could go on tour with. And that band included Johnny Marr, who was fresh out of the Smiths at that time. Maybe he'd done his short stint in the Pretenders also. I forget when that happened now. But much of the rest of the lineup, for different reasons, or not reasons that I could nail down, I'll get to what I think the reason is here in a second, also left after Dusk. And those are David Martin, who was playing the drums and who had played the drums for a couple of albums, those two that I've talked about now, and was the original drummer for ABC. Not to annoy Eric out of a connection, but I'm suspicious that he does not own any ABC anyway, but he was the drummer on the Lexicon of Love album. And also James Eller, who I believe was the bassist, maybe. The reason I believe maybe they all left after that point was that Matt Johnson relocated from England to New York at that point. And in the early 90s, it's not like the internet was there. I know that bigger bands can sort of convene into a spot to make a record and kind of hole up for a couple months at a time, but maybe I couldn't find a strict confirmation of this, but my suspicion is that because contact was going to be difficult at that point, if he was going to move to New York, move to the States, the rest of the guys were like, I'd just as soon stay here in England. But he did have one band member, DC Collard, who was a keyboardist, did continue on through another album. And so it wasn't like Matt Johnson just decided to strip it back to a solo project again, because the next album did have one continuing member and a lot of studio musicians in to fill out the part. So it's not like he pulled it back to a strict solo project for his next album. But Dusk is my favorite, the record, I think by a long shot. There's some single tracks like This Is the Day, maybe August and September, and maybe some of the singles, The Beaten Generation, that I maybe like more than any specific track on here. But overall, I think kind of beginning to end, Dusk is the strongest, the album. And it gets away from some of his weird lyrical proclivities that seem a little more like bravura than brave, but maybe that's just me. It had 3 singles off of the album: Dogs of Lust, Slow Emotion, Replay, and I'm forgetting the third one. Maybe it's Love Is Stronger Than Death. All great tracks, and it was their most commercially successful record. But it feels like Matt Johnson is reflecting on things. I don't know. This is nothing that I researched, but all of a sudden I'm having a flash, literally in this moment as I'm talking, that his brother, I'm aware, had designed the covers of the early records, and I hope I'm not pulling this out of my ass, but I think maybe his brother passed away, perhaps, and the song Love Is Stronger Than Death is maybe a reflection on his brother passing. I should look that up. I'll cut this whole thing out if I'm totally wrong about that. But yeah, just the whole album feels more reflective, and the moodiness, kind of, especially of the second half. Lung Shadows is a great late night song. Got some good trumpet on that one. Bluer Than Midnight, Lonely Planet closes out strong, but all of the rockin' songs, I think, kind of are on the first half. But I don't know that there's a song on here that I don't care for. Unfortunately, it's one of those albums that the song titles, other than Dogs of Lust and Love is Stronger Than Death, the song titles don't call up the songs to me instantly. So it's every time I put it on, it's like, oh yeah, that's right, that's how this one goes. That's great. Which sounds shallow, maybe, that I'm not really a big fan, but yeah, I like it quite a bit. I think it's the strongest the record, and it is the last album that features three of the band members who had been on at least the previous two of Mind Bomb and Dusk. So with that connection, I'll try and leave myself an easier task of editing a video that's not me rambling for 25 minutes that I'm trying to cut down. Unlike Eric, who doesn't want to waste your time, I'm here to waste your time. But I try and cut out my ums at least. So anyway, you can look for Eric's response. He will connect to The's Dusk on his video on Monday on his channel, The Plastic Sound Wave Cult. And with that, I've said my piece. So I thank you for watching. Bye-bye.